Hello and welcome to the Quarantined Wargamer. I'm Big Lee and today I want to talk about the perils of impulse buying. So I recently did a video about shopping online and I heartily encourage you to support your traders and get out there and shop online even if you can't get to a show. But at the same time there's a little bit of a morality tale to be told today, because sometimes you can buy a little bit too quickly, you can impulse buy and end up making a mistake. So here's my top 10 biggest mistakes that I've made over the years. So number 10, the charity shop gaming mat. So I went into I often go to charity shops. They're a really good place to pick up military history books, and you often pick up other items. You have to be a bit picky and you have to get over the fact that it's a charity shop, but often you can find a bargain in there, particularly with books and with certain types of charity shops. And in this particular case, I've gone in there and lo and behold, there's a games mat there, rolled up with taped up, inside out, but nonetheless, it's a Games Workshop games mat. Now, I've got one of those, and I've often used that material, cut it up and use it for small things. In this case, I thought, well, it's only a couple of quid, I'll buy that. I don't know how much a Games Workshop games mat used to go for, but £2 in a charity shop, bargain, wonderful. Got it, took it home, cut the tape, unrolled it, and found that the previous owner had decided to paint terrain all over the mat, and God knows what paint he'd used, but it was an absolute disaster, totally unrecoverable, could not be cleaned or cut around, so that basically went straight in the bin. Fortunately, it only cost me a couple of quid, but there you go, that's what you get for not checking before buying. So number 9, the inadequate tube. So, like many people, I now have a large collection of gaming mats, and I decided I needed a transport tube for taking a particular mat to things like demo games or when I go around host games at other places. I specifically wanted a tube that would fit a 6x4 mat, because that was the one that I particularly wanted to transport, and I found a plastic expandable map tube online. I thought, oh, that's a good idea. Pink, bought it. Got it home. My mat is 6 foot by 4 foot, and I found that the game tube only expanded to 3 foot 9 inches long. So in other words, it was completely inadequate. I ended up giving the tube to a friend who rather innovatively used it for storing maps in. Number 8, scale creep. So now we're going back quite a long time, probably about 10 years, and I was at a game show. I think it was Eastbourne Redoubt was still running game shows back then, and there was a bargain bin and a bag of figures, most of them in original blister packs. They were 15mm. I'd never heard of the manufacturer before, and I can't remember, to be honest, now. And I thought, oh yeah, they're really good. So I thought I'd buy them. 50 quid's worth for a load of figures, wonderful. And got them home and found that actually they weren't quite 15mm, they were probably more like 20mm. They looked completely ridiculous next to my existing collection, and I never ended up using them. In fact, in the end, I think I sold them on eBay at a loss. So my own fault, entirely my own fault. I got swept along by the fact that it was a bargain. I bought from a manufacturer I'd never heard of before, and of course I knew nothing about the figures or how they compared. And as we all know, scale creep is a thing. I don't know whether the packets were mislabelled in some way, but they most definitely were not 15mm, not compared to the stuff that I already had. Number 7, the wrong tanks. So way back, when I was first thinking about getting into 6mm, I decided to have a look at some. I didn't know much about 6mm. I knew I wanted to do tanks. I ended up buying a load of stuff, Sable show I believe it was, and I bought some really nice Soviet tanks. They looked really nice. It was a bit a case of shiny bloody itis here, because I got swept along by them. They were so nice looking. Bit expensive, so I ended up spending about £40 or £50, and I got them home and I did a little bit more research and I did a little bit more thinking about what game system I was going to use, and I ended up going for Normandy. So these Russian tanks were completely useless to me, and I never ended up painting them. So in the end, what I ended up doing is, as usual, I sold them on eBay, again at a loss by the time I'd sorted out postage and stuff. This brings us to number 6, the special offer. Now, I'm not normally one that's susceptible to marketing or sales. I tend to have a good idea of what I want to buy beforehand. I don't get swept along. Apart from this one occasion, it was Salute. I'd had a really good day. I'd spent a lot of money. I still had some money burning a hole in my pocket. And as I was walking out, I saw a show offer, and it was, I think it was a KR model bag. They had an offer on. It was something like 25 or 30 pound off, and I ended up buying this bag. And you know, I didn't really need it. It wasn't really suitable for what I wanted. And actually, I found that a solid container is a better way of transporting figures than a soft bag that can get squidged up. So in the end, I barely used the bag, and I ended up selling it at Selwig a few years later for about a third of the cost. So there you go. I got swept along by a special offer, and I should have known better. Then we come to number 5, the Unused Army. So I've already mentioned the Mists of Time. We're going back even further. I started out in gaming playing role-playing games with a group of friends that I all knew from school. In fact, I still play with them now. And we were very heavily into fantasy stuff at the time, and we started playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And we all picked different armies we wanted to play. And a friend of mine had a Dwarven army. Beautiful models. They were really nice. They're mostly Games Workshop stuff. I really liked the look of the models. He didn't paint most of them. I was about the only person who ever turned up with a painted army, but that's another subject. But anyway, we turned up for a game. He lost disastrously, decided that dwarves were useless, and he wanted to get rid of his army. So I bought them off of him in a peak of enthusiasm, because I really liked the models, and I never ended up using them in myself. We played more games. I already had a collection, and we sort of moved on to other game systems relatively quickly. And the Dwarven army, once again, I think I ended up selling it years and years later at a loss on eBay. There's a thing developing here. Then we come to number 4, a shattering experience. Again, Salute again. I was out and I was looking for 15mm resin scenery, and I came across this company that I'd never heard of before. Sorry, the name eludes me. I've obviously expunged it from my memory because it's such a terrible memory. This model was wonderful. It was lovely and detailed, but the resin was very thin, and I decided that I really liked the model and I was going to buy it, and it was about 40 quid, but I treated myself. It was the last purchase of the day, so I put it in the bag and took it home. And then I dropped the bag, and there was this sickening crunch as this very expensive resin model that was a little bit too thin shattered into tiny pieces. I did manage to repair it a little bit, but to be honest, it looked awful. It was meant to be a ruined building anyway, but you know, it was obvious that this thing had broken, and I was just so unhappy with it. In the end, I think I ended up binning it. I tried repainting it, and it was horrible. So there you go. Make sure your resin is not only thick enough and strong enough to survive the journey home, but get it packaged if you can. I didn't, and I paid the price. So then we come to number 3, the bargain basement varnish. Now, I always use a good quality varnish. I tend to buy Winsor & Newton's Artist's Varnish, gloss and matte for a lot of the stuff, and then I buy Tester's Dull Coat spray, but I also have some brush on stuff, but I do prefer the sprays personally. In this case, I was running out of my gloss varnish, and I was coming to the end of a project, and I decided I needed to make an emergency purchase. So I went out shopping. I couldn't find the Winsor & Newton spray varnish that I normally buy, but I did find some cans of clear varnish in a pound store. Big mistake, because when I got home and I tried it out, it came out almost completely opaque. Now, I can tell you're panicking, and there must be beads of sweat and panic on your forehead. Don't worry, I tested it first. I didn't just spray it straight onto my models. I would have cried if I had, but nonetheless, the varnish was useless, and I ended up throwing it in the bin. Now we come to number 2, twice as good. So I was again at another game show. I came across some books. There was a guy selling them. It wasn't on the bring and buy or anything like that, but he had some books, and I had haggled a little bit for the price, and I bought a couple of books. They were to do with World War II Normandy, the period that I was heavily into at the time, and have become again. And I haggled him a bit for the price, and I was quite chuffed with myself because I managed to knock a couple of quid off. And then when I got home and actually looked through all my book collection, turns out I already had those two books. And worse still, when I got those two books off the shelf and had a look on the inside cover, the price that I'd originally paid for them was in there, and that was cheaper than the price I just haggled for. I think the books ended up going to a friend, so they weren't completely wasted, but obviously I lost out, which has led me now to, I always try to keep a list of the books that I want. I actually use Google Notes on my phone to keep lists of the books that I specifically after, particularly if I want to, I'm buying a series of books and there's one perhaps that I need, so that I don't accidentally end up buying the wrong books. So number one on my list, there's Sable, and then there's Kolinsky Sable. So I normally buy Winsor & Newton Series 7 Kolinsky Sable brushes. They're very expensive, but they're probably the best. They are the best brushes I've ever used. I had a set. They were coming to the end of their life. I'd had them for years, and in a fit of stupidity that even now I just find hard to believe, I ended up buying a set of Games Workshop Sable brushes. Worst brushes I've ever bought. Now maybe I just had a bad batch, I don't know, but I used them. I couldn't keep a tip on these brushes, no amount of my usual brush care regime which I mentioned in an earlier video, none of that helped. These Sable brushes were useless. I used them I think twice and I ended up throwing a whole lot in the bin. They were just utterly useless, and I ended up going out and buying a full new set of Series 7 brushes, and I'm still using them 5 or 6 years later, which just goes to show the money was well spent. So again, there's quality and then there's proper quality. Not all Sable is the same. So there we have it. That's my top 10 disaster list, if you like, for purchases, impulse purchases, where I didn't quite think through what I was doing before I parted with my cash. So as I've said before, I did a little video that encouraged you to please, support your traders, spend a bit of money out there if you can, even though you can't get to shows. But whatever you're doing, don't rush your purchases, don't buy in haste. I hate the expression, but be mindful before you spend your hard-earned cash. Know what it is you want, and try not to get swept away by shiny bloody items like I often do. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you found it interesting, and please share your purchasing disasters, your impulse buy disasters in the comments below or over on my blog, Big Lee's Miniature Adventures. And of course, please, if you feel so inclined, please consider subscribing to this to my YouTube channel. So that's it for now. I just wanted to say I hope everyone's keeping well, and whatever you're doing, whatever the lockdown measures are or aren't in your particular area, I hope you're navigating through all the confusion and staying well. So until next time, I'll see you next week. Stay rolling high.